My first ever video game was actually King of Fighters EX Neoblood for the Game Boy Advance, and I'm quite fond of that game, despite the fact that one is basically a fucking Kusoge, and two, you basically cannot play, like, all of the characters, unless they're strikers. But apart from that, that was actually, like, my main start into fighting games as a whole. But not in the ways, like, oh, trying to be competitive and such, but more in the terms of, like, you know, just a general interest in the genre as a whole, because then around that time I played, when I was a kid at least, I played Dead or Alive 3. That game is hella dope, by the way. What else? I also played, like, the older KOF games, like 2002 and 2003, which had, like, was part of, like, a KOF collection for the Xbox. So it was, like, Guilty Gear Reload, Hyper Street Fighter 2, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I guess I could say, like, when I was a kid. Oh, and even Smash Brawl as well. So I guess I could say, like, when I basically got my start in fighting games, but more in a casual sense.
Technically, it would have been in 2019 when I got back from New Jersey, because I wasn't too into it competitively. All I did was just play Smash 4, Brawl, Ultimate Online all the time with my buddies. And it wasn't until I actually went to a local in Jersey when I was like, okay, this is actually a lot more ridiculous than I thought. And then I started getting into other games because I saw a Tekken 7 clip from Super Kuma doing a pseudo and almost TOD from one side of the screen to the other, and I was like, Tekken looked kind of nice. So when I come back to PR, and I realized that there is a local over at San Juan, and it has almost everything under the sun. They even had a VCI in there, and I wanted to register for 3 games, but that's a lot of money, so I just stayed in Smash because that was the one I had the most experience on quote in. That's another 0-2 though, but I realized that, wow, Tekken's a lot more fun like this than I thought. It's a lot more fun than Smash Brothers, I thought. So I just stopped playing Smash Brothers almost in its entirety and just focused strictly on Under Night and Tekken before COVID came in.
My first memory of ever playing a fighting game was going over to my friend's house, and he got Street Fighter 2 on Sega Genesis. And, you know, we were kids. Neither of us really knew what we were doing. He was just, you know, we each found one special move that we could do and just kind of threw that at each other. It was him throwing out Honda's 100 hand slap, and I was mashing on T-Hawk's Condor dive. And that's the first time I ever remember playing a fighting game. And, I don't know, when I got a little bit older, I wasn't, like, into the genre or anything, but I do remember every now and then my family would drag us to this bowling alley, and I didn't like to bowl, but they had some arcade cabinets there, and I saw they had 2 that looked really cool to me. One of them was Tekken 3, and one of them was Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Ooh. And, you know, obviously as a kid, I didn't know how to play these games, but Marvel 2 had, you know, it had Mega Man, and it had the X-Men, so obviously I wanted to get on that the whole time while they were bowling. So, you know, I used to have a lot of fun with that kind of thing as a kid, even though I didn't really know what I was doing with those games. I didn't really become aware that there was much of a competitive community around this genre until probably around like 2009, 2010, when a couple of my friends got into Street Fighter 4 and BlazBlue, and you know, I wanted to beat my friends, so I started looking stuff up online and realized, oh hey, there's a lot of people who know these games, who know how to play these games. Maybe this seems like something I want to get involved in. So, you know, I played those games for a while in college. I first started, you know, doing like kind of a weekly meetup with some other people who like those kinds of games, and that was also when I first started going to, you know, larger tournaments. And from there, you know, after I graduated, I found kind of a local scene around where I lived, did the weeklies, did the monthly tournaments, and from there I just kept picking up more games, picking up going to more competitions, doing in-person stuff and online stuff, and it's actually just more recently that I started discovering, kind of a love for the much older games through Fightcade, through, just various ports and things. I think there's a lot to love in kind of the older, stranger, maybe a little bit more busted kinds of games that you can't really get from the modern stuff. I don't think modern games are necessarily more simple than older games. I think information is moving a lot faster, so people learn the intricacies of them a lot faster. But I think maybe what's causing some of that is that modern games definitely feel a lot more planned out than older ones. Like, there's a lot more care taken for balance and for accessibility, which are not, inherently bad things, but there are some experiences that, you might be able to get in older games that you won't necessarily find as much of in newer games. It's
all these modern games where you just need to worry, like, it's just one patch away from having a character that you really love to play just become fucking irrelevant because they just patched the living heck out of it, and now it
Can
just
I
doesn't
counter
perform as well.
that argument with the fact that they don't even do that? They buffed Nago. Oh shit. It don't matter though. Ah. Yeah. Like, they buffed Nago and they nerfed Soul.
I get what you're saying about patch culture maybe ruining a bit of the fun, because when it comes to older games that are not going to get any updates anymore because they're done being worked on, maybe you have a character that is overpowered, maybe you have a character that's weak, maybe you have a matchup that is just hilariously one-sided, but the conversation around it is never going to be about, when is the company going to fix this? When is somebody else going to step in and change this game so that it feels better to me? The conversation by necessity has to be about, well, how do I deal with this character being strong? How do I deal with my character being weak? Street Fighter 2 Turbo Vega is always
Yes,
going to be Street Fighter 2 Vega. It's on you to stop him from doing his Vega shenanigans. It's not on anybody else to patch the game.
Well, I guess for me, like for the overall, like how you find out about DPs, it's just me, like, just hearing like all these commentators, like when I was like watching like random fighting game footage, like people saying, oh, you did with a DP and all that such, and it took me a while until I finally realized what it actually is, and then just later actually pulling it off at a game, basically, the typical forward and then cortical forward to punch, all that kind of stuff.
I think it's kind of interesting to see just how much Street Fighter specifically, how much influence it has over what we call things in this whole genre, because not every anti-air and vulnerable attack is a dragon punch, but no matter what it is, no matter what game it's from or what character is using it, we still call it a DP.
The influence is there.
Like, we call any instant any special move that you use as low to the ground as possible in the air, we still call it a tiger knee, just for Sagat having that motion one time, even though he doesn't even have that motion anymore. We still I just think it's interesting. Or like a quarter circle forward motion is still often called a fireball motion, just for Ryu having that as his fireball. But, yeah. I think my first real tournament experience was I was home for the summer from college, and a local game store by me was running a Street Fighter 4 tournament. I knew a little about the game at the time. I entered. I played Cody because I think at the time he was the only character who I could like really execute any kind of combos with. I did badly in the tournament, of course, first time and everything, but I did win a raffle for a plate of chicken wings, so that's a moral victory right there.
Oh hell yeah, dude! That's the important victory right there. Fuck winning Street Fighter 4 bracket. That right there, that's some true gamer shit.
But yeah, even though I did very badly in the actual matches, it was just such an amazing time. Meeting people, talking about the game with people, having that kind of sense of community. And after the tournament, I found out that the people who run it are the same people who held a sort of a local gathering, a weekly scene for that game and for a couple of other games, and that's how I started getting involved in that. I think if you're in a situation where you can get a wired setup somehow, then I think you should. It's not terribly expensive. If you're in a situation where your setup is far from your router, there are options for getting around that. There's like power line adapters and stuff. I think once you have tried doing it on wired, it's very difficult to want to go back to Wi-Fi. And if somebody's in a situation where they absolutely can't wire up, their parents or their landlord or their roommates, are preventing them from being able to do a proper setup, I get it. I don't think you should be disqualified from playing these games entirely, but you do have to understand that if you are playing in that kind of situation, it's going to make other people less likely to want to play with you, and you kind of just have to accept that. I was going to say the thing about fighting games is that when it comes to your connection, you really don't need much in terms of like upload and download speed. The stability is a lot more important because the kind of data that you're sending is, it's inputs that the game is replicating. You're not, necessarily streaming a huge video file or downloading a massive file or anything like that. So, when it comes to having a good experience, stability and not having sudden lag spikes or sudden drop inputs is a lot more important than just raw connection speed.
Wi-Fi is a lot more unstable for fighting games, but it's completely fine if you played essentially any other genre. Why? Game don't care if your connection unstable, especially if you're playing a game like a shooter, like you're playing Halo or Fortnite or something, right? You're connected to a server, and whatever input you do, it's just a matter of your input getting there, and the game doesn't care. If you take too long, it's still gonna keep going, which means anybody with an even better or more solid connection is going to play just fine, and it's not going to be affected by you solely. Versus something like Call of Duty, where they never use servers until like last year or something. Yeah, literally until like last year. So like, at least the game tries to pick the best host, aka somebody with like the most stable connection, Ethernet, whatever, right? But you would see back in the day a lot of people lagging, and that is literally because of Wi-Fi and people being way too far away from the router when they shouldn't be. In some cases, they can't really help it, which is understandable, and that's why a lot of people try to minimize it with just trying to hook up a really long Ethernet cable. For fighting games, you really need the stability, or else you literally can't play the game.
Yeah, that's a fact, because it just requires like reactionary movement.
It's
like,
not even reactionary. Just pressing a button can feel like a misery if it's in delay or the nerd has like random spikes of rollback.
And it's even more miserable when you, like, for example, you want to do like a combo, like a simple combo that you practice a lot, like in offline training mode, and you can't even do that shit because you might not be used to like the delay that its netcode is providing, essentially. So you might fuck up like various times.
The playability of connections around the world is definitely getting better as games are getting improvements to their netcode and rollback is being introduced into more games. It's definitely gotten better, but there are limits to it. I would say my main piece of advice, regardless of what your level is to is to talk to people. Don't ever be afraid to ask questions. You know, no matter how much you think, they're going to make fun of me for being a newbie. I'm going to be asking stupid questions. I'm going to look like I have no idea what I'm doing. People want to help other people get into this genre. That's something that you'll find if you do get into fighting games, is that once you start to love it, you want to spread that love to as many people as possible. So people, you know, the genre certainly looks intimidating. You know, you've got people playing at high levels, you've got people popping off after, you know, really exciting moments, and it looks like something that is just untouchable to an outsider. But if you just get into a discussion with somebody, if you join a Discord server, if you just talk to somebody and say, hey, I'm interested in trying this out, could you help me get started? People are going to be so happy to point you to resources, to show you videos, to get into a game and help explain things to you in a live setting. It's really, you just, you know, FGC stands for Fighting Game Community, and that C part of it, that community, is the most important part.
All I have to say on this, just to reiterate on that, if you were like me and you go to your first tournament and go like 0-2, please do not get discouraged about it. It is completely fine. It's just a normal experience that even some of the most experienced players in any fighting game go through, like going 0-2 at a tournament. And you don't have to be like, like top like 3 straight Evo champion, like hella fucking good at fighting games that can do no wrong. No, that doesn't exist. Like, even if you consider yourself like not that great in fighting games, you can still consider yourself part of the FGC. Like, whoever said like the FGC, like you need to be like hella good at a fighting game to be part of the overall community. Hell, I've entered like many tournaments in my life in these past couple of months, and I've only won like 3 like overall. And even if I go 0-2, it doesn't really fucking matter, because I could just like I could just like, oh, thank God this tournament is over, and now I could just like go play friendlies with my friends, and you know, just have a good overall time. So it's just a sense of just like finding friends and just, you know, having a great time. Like, not everything in fighting games has to be like winning tournaments and such. It could just be just turning off your brain, pressing buttons, and just have a good old time, basically.
Tournaments are an excuse for people to show up to a place, and you don't have to care about tournament. Even more so attempting to win one, because all it really is just a long gauntlet match. It's way better for you to just play friendlies with people and ask them what's this, what's that, instead of just staying silent, handshaking after the tournament match, because you don't get anything from that except, wow, I really suck at this matchup. It's just better to play friendlies, and a tournament is a good place to do it, because you get like 2 hours before that thing even starts to get games in, to get some advice in, and then post-tournament, maybe it depends how long they run. That's why Discords are a thing, because people can just go in there and play whatever, right?
Yeah.
And for specific game advice, there's wikis with data and stuff, and sometimes even like written details on how to deal with a certain character or how to deal with this move. You know, Dust Loop. Tekken doesn't really have anything like that except the character doc, because for Tekken you can maybe excuse it because the game is way too big in scale to like kind of organize all that in one place. But for something like King of Fighters, you can get a lot of the info from a website, Dream Cancel. For any Guilty Gear game, for any Arxis game, you got Deathloop, obviously. For Street Fighter, you got SRK. I don't know, I think it's supercombo.gg now, yeah?
Yeah, it's Super Combo. That's
Super
basically
Combo.
where you go for any Capcom game. Exactly. That's part of why it's so important to find a community or find another player to make a connection with, because these games are not good at teaching you how to play them. just
Unless
in
it's
the game
Mortal
itself.
Kombat or Injustice 2, maybe.
Well,
Even
even
Killer
with-
Instinct.
Even
But
with those games, they're good at explaining their mechanics, but they're not really great at explaining how to deal with certain character tools, or how to get around this string of attacks, or where you can punish this or that.
Like matchup specific stuff, essentially.
Yeah, the kinds of things that you're going to be running into from match to match. They're not great at explaining to you within the game how to deal with those, and that's why it's important to make those connections in the communities. I didn't make top 8 at any local tournaments until I don't know, probably 5 or so years after I started playing, and I haven't won any competitions until the last couple of years. So don't be discouraged if your record isn't amazing. Any time that you're playing, you are learning. In the background of your brain, you are learning and getting better, even if it doesn't look like your win record or your rank or whatever is showing it. You are learning, and you have to be patient with yourself.
It's a work in progress, basically.
I also want to add that it's a lot of people, especially in the FGC itself, where they feel like it's an obligation they have to play the game all the time. You don't. You can play other games, you can play literally anything else or whatever, and at the same time play fighting games. It's yeah, fighting games are the hardest thing you're going to play ever in your life, but it's not an obligation. If you're that tired, if you're that irritated, you can literally just take a whole month or a year break and just play whatever else you got. If you want to play Fortnite over whatever, if you want to play Fortnite over Stripe, you can do it. It's not an obligation. Not everybody likes having to stay there and having to make themselves torture themselves just so they can learn the game.
Yeah, once your hobby starts feeling like a job, it's not your hobby.
Yeah.
This isn't an MMO where you have daily login stuff and you have to do your weekly raids, and you have to be there every single time, or else you're going to fall behind your guild. It's not like that.